Ukrainian officials, soldiers and journalists run for cover in separatist-controlled Donetsk as official monitors report the number of ceasefire violations in the east at almost 2,000. Evacuations are now taking place on both sides of the border. NATO pulling its people out of Kiev as pro-Russian separatists order a mass evacuation of eastern Ukraine. 700,000 civilians shifted into Russia.
This is part of Russia's plan. I can say for sure it follows a scenario written in Moscow, and the separatists just follow it.
Russia is accused of a campaign of misinformation and waging cyber warfare, with more Ukrainian banks reporting operational failures. The Ukrainian president repeating calls for a diplomatic solution.
I don't know what the president of the Russian Federation wants, so I am proposing a meeting.
But those standing beside Ukraine believe they know exactly what Putin wants.
At the moment, war looks inevitable.
As of this moment, I'm convinced he's made the decision.
But I think we need to prepare for the worst-case scenario, and that worst-case scenario could happen as early as next week.
The US has reiterated its intention to impose unprecedented economic sanctions in the wake of an invasion.
We will target Russia's financial institutions and key industries, and those who aid and abet this unprovoked invasion.
But Zelensky says that will not be enough.
We don't need your sanctions after the bombardment, or after we will have no economy, or part of our country will be occupied. Why would we need those sanctions then?
With Putin evidently undeterred by threats and uninterested in diplomacy, are we simply counting down the days to the inevitable?
Moscow correspondent for the Daily Beast, Anna Nemtsova, joins us now. Anna, you're in Moscow right now. What are Russians actually being told is happening at the border?
Well, Russians, it depends on generation, but younger people, I would say 40 plus, they watch television and they see one picture, and younger generation gets the news from the internet, and everybody knows there is a giant army on the Ukrainian border. Maybe the state television tells more about the shelling of the Donetsk and Luhansk side, the pro-Russian side, while independent media report about both sides of the front lines, and people are aware, and 61% already of Russians, by the recent polls, say that they live with constant fear of a full-scale war. And this is the highest level of fear in Russia since late 1980s. Russians were never as afraid of a big war as they are afraid now. But experts say that Vladimir Putin might not be aware of the situation because he doesn't get the independent polls. But whoever you talk with in Moscow, whether you sit in a restaurant or you go to theater, sooner or later people begin to talk about the war and how worried they are.
Anna, on that, what is Putin's endgame here? What does he actually want?
Well, yesterday we heard that ODKB, which is sort of Russia's military union with post-Soviet countries, with Central Asian countries, with Belarus, they are ready to send their peacekeepers, so-called peacekeepers, to these separatist regions in Ukraine. That happened in Azerbaijan last year when Russia interfered in the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That also happened recently in Kazakhstan when these joint forces arrived to keep peace in Kazakhstan during giant rallies. So that might happen, and then they're not going to be Russian soldiers, but they're going to be Kazakh, Tajik, Belarusian, Armenian soldiers on the territory of Ukraine.
Anna,
that's one of
the sanctions that the West is talking about, though, imposing on Russia if this happens, would be catastrophic for the Russian economy. Why is that not enough to deter Putin at this point?
Well, Putin has granted 600,000, at least, people in Ukraine with Russian passports. So they're Russian citizens, and he has evacuated 40,000 now from Donbass to Russia. And they're talking about moving more people. But the more people arrive, the more they say and they say on camera how pissed they are. You know, they're just like tired, exhausted after 8 years of war. I traveled in Ukraine for a month. I just got back to Moscow, and I hear the same messages. We are tired of the war. It's been 8 years. We're exhausted. So there must be some solution. But as President Zelensky, Ukrainian president, said in Munich yesterday, he said that Ukraine says they want peace. We want peace. The West says we want peace. Putin says we're not going to invade. One of us is lying. So the sanctions, he says, are needed now, not afterwards, when everything has been bombed in all the towns. There are lots and lots of little towns along the so-called connecting line, full of children, kindergartens, schools, old people. That's going to be even a bigger devastation, a huge crisis for generations to come. We already have 8-year-old children in those regions on both sides of the front lines who go home after 5 p.m. because the shelling begins. And one girl told me that she didn't know what the moon is like. So she, in other words, didn't go outside after 5 p.m. much in her life.
Anna, I know you're talking all the time to people in Donetsk, in those border areas. What are they telling you about how this is escalating?
So if before the fire, the shelling began after 5 p.m. and during the night, people could hear some shooting, and that continued for 8 years. And some houses in this zone of, they call it 0.5 zone, less than 1 kilometer, houses got damaged. Now it begins at 9 a.m., sometimes earlier, and continues during the day. So I received a few videos of people who travel back and forth, and they took videos of shelling. I could hear the shots. So even during the day, people report fire on both sides of the front lines.
Anna Nemtsova, thank you so much for joining us, and please do stay safe.
Thank you.